And before actually, oops, I got off that page. Let me fix this. Let me get back on the page. All right, so before we get started with our blessings of the sons.
You know what we don't do every time, Rabbi? We don't say the blessings.
Okay.
I think we should, don't you think so, before we do it?
Absolutely. Why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
What were the last three words?
The last three words are la'asok b'divrei Torah, literally to be busy with or to engage in
Or to
the
turn
words
around.
of Torah.
Or,
Osek is work or engagement, busyness.
and also isn't like to turn around or to look at or to.
No, that would be a different la'asok. But from Rabbi Richard Address in Philadelphia, gave me the way to remember it, the mnemonic device. We always should be soaking in Torah. We soak in the bath of Torah.
Good word.
The words of Torah are our medium of relaxation.
All right.
So we soak them in. All right, so this is what the Torah looks like that we are reading now. And you'll notice it's written with each of the tribes gets its tiny little ancient section. It's a little bit more of the poetic style. As we can tell, it's not written in the block of prose, but written out with a little bit more of the separations of the stanzas, verses. And the traditional view is that when we hit the poetry of Torah, we have the oldest sections of probably the oral tradition long before it was written down. And we'll see this week and next week, the blessings of the children are a little bit harder to follow, a little bit stranger, but are possibly even a compilation of a number of different versions of the poem of the blessings of the tribes, which will come out at the end of Deuteronomy and be a little bit different. And one of the things we'll look at is what was the purpose of the why writer putting these in. And of course, once we get to the editor redactor and the material has been set in scroll, not set in stone, we have the editor redactor has to, in fact, include it. So we'll be looking at what's going on, which tribes get what. And again, just to point out, as we'll see, this big block right here, the biggest block is Judah, which is not surprising since this is the Judahite preeminent statement or blessing. Shimon and Levi up here are not too bad, but there's two of them to get that spot, which is less than Judah by himself. And then the other big section is Joseph. And as we're going to see, Joseph is given a different way of dealing with what Joseph is all about. So that's where we're going in the closing out of chapter 49 that will be starting today. So now to the text. And again, any questions about any of the things before we delve into it? Good. All right, so chapter 48 finishes up the Ephraimite or Elohim or northern or coastal, depending on our divisions. This was the story, therefore, of the preeminence of Ephraim and Joseph, Ephraim through Joseph. And we had that whole scene last week of Jacob crossing his hands to make sure that his right hand went on the younger one's head, Ephraim, and his left hand on the older Manasseh, as opposed to what Joseph expected, which was the older would get the best blessing and the younger, and why Joseph would expect that, given that he's number 11 or 12, if you include Dinah in line. Why would the older one get something special? It's always the younger. And knowing that his father's Jacob's and Esau's story of the older and the younger, yet Joseph wants to suddenly say, let's get back to the older gets the better blessing.
I think it's
And
because he saw the downfall of what that meant. He lived through what basically the experience of when the parent showed favoritism for the
all
younger
right.
versus the older, and maybe
So-
wisdom hit him.
So Genesis is a story of family dysfunction passed down across the generations.
Yeah.
And Joseph, with his Egyptian therapist, has learned to try to deal with it and is trying to intervene in the transmission of generational dysfunction
No.
I agree.
unsuccessfully. And so, yeah, he even last week grabbed his father's hand and said, tried to pull it off of Ephraim's head, says, no, Dad. And Dad says, no, no, I know what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. And so finally, verse 21 now, Jacob will finish his blessing discourse in this particular version of the story. Vayomer Yisrael el Yosef, Hine Anochi met, Vahaya Elohim imachem, Veheshiv etchem el eretz avotechem. So Vayomer Yisrael, now it's Yisrael, not Yaakov, saying, El Yosef, to Joseph, Hine Anochi met, behold, I die. And one can choose whether I will die, I am dying, death is upon me. Very simple Hebrew statement, just Anochi met. I'm dead. V'haya Elohim imachem, and it will be Elohim imachem, with you. And there's and it will be is the will be with you. But again, this is that verb tense, which is the strange blending of the perfect into the future. So God was with you, is with you, and will be with you in an ongoing sense. God is with you. The heshiv, the root shuv, here is the returning, the turning around. Heshiv, the causative form. So God will cause you to return. So God will bring you back, etchem, bring all of you. And again, our plural form of the second person, bring all you ones back. El eretz avotechem, to the land of your fathers. So this is back to Canaan, but not immediately.
Where did you get the God will be, I got the will be, but what
The
about,
haya, the haya, remember, haya is the perfect tense.
right, but where'd you get the God was, is, will be?
So the perfect would be was, but the changes the tense into the future.
Right.
Mm.
The reversing vav.
So therefore it's the, and it was that God will be, is in a sense what the Hebrew is trying to say. So this becomes the perfect in the future, which puts it into an ongoing sense. Or since it's told by an author hundreds of years later, we already know God did it. But Joseph is still saying it will happen. Jacob rather is saying it will happen, Yisrael. So it will be that God is with you. And yes, the is, remember the present tense of the verb to be is never stated in Hebrew. So Elohim imachem could be translated as God is with you. And then we could read this as V'haya, and it will be Elohim imachem, God is with you. Which again gives us that sense of an ongoing chronology. Hard to translate Hebrew into English because we don't do tenses the same way. So we get all sorts of other kinds of statements.
Is this the same usage in modern English, in modern Hebrew?
Modern Hebrew, remember, was developed in a European form of resurrecting the language by Eliezer ben Yehuda, and so modern Hebrew follows a simpler flow. Speaking biblical Hebrew in Israel today would be somewhat akin to trying to talk either Shakespearean or possibly Chaucerian English in London today.
But would you have a V'haya in modern Hebrew?
It doesn't. It's really done in a much more simple tense. Celine was more recently in Israel than I. I don't think people walk around speaking that, Celine.
I mean, Vahaya would just mean it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
There's
as
no-
simple, and it was.
Yeah.
They don't. There's not really that sense of vav hipuch, the transitioning vav in modern Hebrew, and probably would not begin a sentence with the any more than in English we would start with and.
Though we do it poetically, so they can certainly do it in the Torah.
Yes, but Torah is a different language
Yeah,
in that
it's
sense.
okay.
All right, so you will be returned to the land of your fathers. Va'ani, and I, natati, I gave. And again, natati includes the I gave of the va'ani, and sometimes even stronger, va'anochi. So this is the I gave to you. Va'ani natati lecha, I gave to you. And now we get some very strange statement for which we don't know where the story came from because the story's not in the Torah. I gave to you Shechem achad. Shechem, remember, was an area in Canaan
Yeah.
where we got our cave. But Shechem, the word, just means a portion. So Shechem achad, I gave you a one portion. That is, would indicate the additional portion. I gave you extra, al achecha, on your brothers. And that was remembering that Joseph gets the double portion by way of his sons Ephraim and Manasseh being adopted up into the ranks of their uncles. So I gave you Shechem achad al achecha. I gave you one Shechem, one portion on your brothers. Or if one wanted to, one could possibly translate it along the lines of, I gave you the Shechem one. So you inherit this cave and this whole Shechem area that Abraham bought. And of course, remember, there was also a problem in Shechem with their sister. But I gave you Shechem achad al achecha, so, but now is Asher lakachti miyad ha'emori b'charbi uvakashti. Asher lakachti, that I took, miyad ha'emori, from the hand of the Amorites, the Emori, b'charbi uvakashti, with my sword and with my bow.
Who are the Amoris?
The Amorites are the Amorites. Lots of little floating tribes around that Canaan area. Later, we're going to get the Hivites and the Jebusites and the Hittites and the Amorites.
So Jacob had to fight the Amoris?
Apparently, Jacob, with his sword and with his bow, took away some portion, some area, the land of Shechem, something from the Amorites. We have no battles of Jacob's story in the Torah. And so this seems to be some flashback to a story that may have been known to the biblical audience and was never actually told in any canonized or sacred text of the E document.
Hmm.
Yeah, very strange. We're not going to deal with all of where that came from or what it means or what it is, or again, as we saw in the previous story, is Jacob's mind wandering? Is he dealing with some end-of-life dementia? Because we saw that in the previous text where he says, these boys are going to be blah, blah, and then we get a little editorial intervention, and then we get, he says, who are these two?
Yeah.
So we may be getting some story of the decline of Jacob's mental faculties.
But aren't you surprised that they would have put something in that implied that?
Oh, not at all. First of all, if it's in the story, they had to keep it. Second of all, unlike the surrounding cultures where the heroes of old were super, our heroes of old are flawed. We recount the flaws of the generations that came before us.
So you're assuming that in the writing of the Torah that they really kept everything, that you don't think there was any kind of selective screening or?
There's clearly selective screening because there are statements that indicate material that we don't have. The question would be, when was the selection of screening done? At what stage? It seems to be fairly clear that by the time this is all being edited into one massive document, there is very little selective screening going on.
Yeah.
Because
Because
the
they
transition
would've
from
made-
oral history into written history, there would have been selective screening, but we have no way of knowing what was selected, except for hints at it, like this, where there would seem to have been in the oral document possibly, or in the oral transmission, possibly some story earlier on that was no longer included by the time it was written down.
So do you think that was a political thing? That the inconsistencies and the repetitions were left in so as not, because they came from different regions?
All sorts of different, yes, I would say the answer of any reason for the selectivity you give, probably the answer was yes, that was a factor. Yeah, we can't know. Certainly, we know, we would seem to believe that some of what is being written is political around the later time when it's being written. The whole stories about the Moabites and the Midianites and the Ishmaelites were very likely later political stories to explain the then political climate. But were these left out because the story was too graphic for tender ears at an earlier, was that old story, which if it existed, was it left out because when it was being written down, they ran out of paper? Their storage device had maxed out and they couldn't buy another flash drive. Yeah, we don't know. We can't know really. A lot of biblical scholars look at surrounding texts, of surrounding culture texts, to try to see what they included, to see what we might have known about, written about, but we're not going into that depth, fortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems certainly something's missing from the earlier story that is in Jacob's mind at the end of this story. So now we move on. Move on to chapter 49, and we begin the last two chapters of Genesis, the last chapter of Jacob, and Jacob closes out his life by blessing each of his 12 sons. And we're going to see there certainly would seem to be a reason for the ways in which these blessings are presented. Again, remembering that this is the Judah story. And Judah is fourth down in birth order, which means somehow we have to eliminate the opportunity for the first three to become the major tribe. For Jacob, if we read it from the standpoint of the time of Jacob, Jacob gives reasons why he is eliminating the first three. If we read it from the standpoint of the Judah author, in those later generations, then it's the Judah author justification for why the older three were eliminated. But here we go. Vayikra Yaakov el banav, vayomer he'asfu va'agida lachem et asher yikra etchem ba'acharit hayamim. Vayikra Yaakov, now Yaakov calls El Banav to his sons. Vayomer, saying, and he said, Hey Asfu. Asaph, remember, is that word from which we get the name for Yosef. Gather in, add on. So imperative, causative, plural. Cause to gather, come together, add yourselves to each other. Va'agida, and I will tell. Same word as the Haggadah, the telling on Passover. Va'agida lachem, and I will tell to you, et asher yikra etchem, what will be called you, ba'acharit hayamim, in the after days. So in the days to come, in the after times. Hikavtsu v'shim'u b'nei Yaakov v'shimu el Yisrael avichem. Now we get into classic biblical poetry. Classical biblical poetry is built on parallelisms. We have two parts of a verse saying the same thing with different words. So, heasvu, gather together. Hikavtsu, come in together as a community. The word, the root word there is the same word that gives us a kibbutz.
Well, the first one is what?
Heasvu, gather together. Hikavtsu, and commune with one another. Agida lachem, I will tell to you. Shimu, listen. B'nei Yaakov, the sons, listen, sons of Yaakov. And then parallel to that, the Shimu el Yisrael, listen to Yisrael, avichem, your father.
I'm still not clear. The word v'yisma'u is
Yishma'u, shama, listen.
and listen, but the first one I thought was communities you put.
V'shim'u. Hikavtsu parallels to up here the he'asfu.
But I thought you put it as communities.
Commune together.
Or commune.
Commune together. Be a kibbutz.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
There are different ways of saying gather together.
What was Vishimu?
Shim'u, listen.
Vishimu, but
Shimu b'nei Yaakov, listen, sons of Yaakov. Shimu el Yisrael avichem, listen to Yisrael, your father. Sons of Yaakov, the people who are the offspring of the father. And Yaakov and Yisrael. Basically, the first part of 2 and the second part of 2 say the same thing.
Whose voice is this?
This is Yaakov.
It is, okay.
Yeah, starting back on Vayikra Yaakov, El Banav. So Yaakov calls out to his sons. He announces to his sons, and he begins his poem. Heasfu hikavsu, Bnei Yaakov, Yisrael avichem. Now the first one. Reuven b'chori, ata kochi v'reshit oni yeter se'et v'yeter oz.
Oh, you were right, Celine. It is O's.
Well, you can read it as Oz or Oz. The root Oz is strength, as in Adonai Oz la'amo yitain.
But you can say either one then, right?
You can you will hear people reading it as both.
Okay.
All right.
Technically, yes, it's a kamatz katan. But when you're reading for fluency, read Oz. I doubt anybody in any place where if you're reading from the Torah and read it as Oz, nobody's going to correct you.
Okay.
You get the wrong trope, they'll correct you. So Reuven, Bechori, Reuven, my firstborn. And what I suggest here, because this is not language that you're necessarily going to want to learn as actual words that you'll use for the most part, you can follow along with the translation for these things like excelling and dignity and but Reuven bechori, Reuven, my firstborn, ata kochi, you are my strength. One would have hoped. V'reshit oni, again, kochi and reshit oni, parallel terms, rather than dealing with are these things that we're going to really deal with. Yeter se'et v'yeter oz. So you go over to the translation and you see the beginning of my might, excellent of dignity, excellent of power, are these technical terms that we're seeing here.
So of my might, that's Oni?
Oni and kochi, again, we're dealing with parallel terms.
Okay.
So kochi is power. Reshit oni then would be the root source, the beginning. And then yeter se'et and yeter oz, again, paralleling the terms. And the root yeter is excelling. And we're going to see it in the next verse in a different form, which again gives you the parallel term. You see down here, totar. So this is the statement, Reuven, my firstborn, my power, my strength, the beginning of the lineage of seed that I've created. You would have been the greatest, the excelling of all of my power and all of my might. You would have been all of the good stuff, except pachaz kamayim. You are as
Well, before you go on,
Oh.
dignity is she'et?
se'et,
She'et.
se'et,
She'et.
and
And-
oz.
Okay.
Again, paralleling terms.
Okay.
Where is would have been?
Well, I'm saying this is not in the text,
Because
but we're going to get it in the contrast between 3 and 4.
I mean, it was odd because 3 is saying, "Oh, you are my firstborn. Oh, you
Right.
are, of course, my."
You are all these things.
And then all of a sudden he goes, "Oh, but you're unstable as water," and it slams him. So
Exactly.
Wait,
So that's why I added the would have been.
where is
This
the,
would,
how'd
Yeah.
you know to do that?
well, because verse 3 is the statement of what we might say was the expectation for Reuven.
Oh,
And then 4 becomes the actuality of Reuven.
mm,
We could see statement verse 3 as the Reuben potential, and verse 4 is the Reuben actual.
mm.
Could you go over the 3 again and what where the parallel you're talking about is?
Okay, so Reuven Bechori, so Reuven, my firstborn, and then Kochi Vereshit Oni. So all of these are different parallel terms for the expectation of the firstborn.
Parallel terms.
Yes,
I still don't
Bechori,
understand.
Kochi, and Reshit Oni are 3 different ways of saying what one would have expected from the firstborn. Or if you want to read it straight, what is the firstborn? What
So,
is Reuben?
so it's you, my strength, and then beginning
Right,
what
you are the beginning of my power.
of my might, excelling,
And then
dignity.
Yeter Se'et and Yeter Oz.
Yet,
Those are,
what is beter? Excelling.
Yeter is excel. I translate it as excellent, but it's the root is excelling,
Okay.
rising up above.
Okay.
Yoter is more. Yoter is a way in which we say it a lot in modern Hebrew, as something is more than something.
Mhm.
So you are the cream of the crop, the grade A prime, top of the heap, excelling. And in a sense, verse 3 and verse 4, which are the statements of Reuben, are opposite parallels. This is what you would have been, verse 3. This is what you are, verse 4.
Yeah, very nice, man.
You are pachas kamayim. You are as unrestrained as water. Al totar. Do not, now here, do not excel, or will not, you will not excel. Totar, you will excel, you will rise up, you will be more. Al totar, you will not be more. And why don't you get what you deserved? Ki alita mishkevei avicha az hilalta yitzui Allah. Now, this does actually harken back to a story that we had earlier in Jacob's life with his sons. You will recall Reuben slept with one of the concubines, the maidservants. Which was apparently an invasion of his father's property. We don't get it seen here as incest, but rather as an invasion of his father. So here we have the reminder of that story. Ki alita mishkeve avicha, for you went up, mishkeve, from the shakav, from the lying down, avicha, of your father. The shakav is again the lying down. One of the biblical terms that seems to indicate sexual relations. So you lay down with your father and you got up from there.
Meaning he lied down with the concubine.
With the maidservant, exactly.
Yeah.
Az hilalta, and thus you profaned. Yitzui Allah, my couch upon which you went up. So again, this is Mishkaveh Avicha, the lying down place of your father, the Yitzui Allah, the going up from his couch, his lying down place. So Reuben sorry, you have now been cut out from the inheritance of predominance. Verse 3, expectation. Verse 4, the profanation of the expectation.
Can you answer this, Rabbi Sam? Which two sons took revenge upon Dina's lover?
Verse 5.
And which like who put Yosef in the pit? And like one of the sons, what was it, Judah, said, "Oh, don't, let's not kill him. Let's just
All
put
right,
him
so again, the problem with that story is they've been put together. I took them apart. Reuben put Joseph in the pit, planning to go back and get him. Judah sold him to the traveling Ishmaelite Midianites. Reuben said, don't kill him, put him in the pit. Judah said, don't kill him, sell him. In the Reuben story, Reuben put him in the pit. The Midianites pull him out of the pit and sell him to the Ishmaelites. Reuben goes back and he's no longer there and says, what happened? Where is he? In the Judah story, Judah, he's never in a pit. Judah says, don't kill him, and sells him to the Ishmaelites instead. We read them as one story, and the commentary says, Reuben put him in the pit. Judah pulled him out of the pit. Judah sold him to the Midianites, who sold him to the Ishmaelites. So we get a very different view of the story when they're put together. But yes, Judah was the seller, Reuben was the pitter. And the Reuben story was in the blue story, which means the red story doesn't even care about it. In the Judah story, Joseph is no longer a factor because Judah's the one who gets everything. So he doesn't care what he did way back then to Joseph.
That's interesting.
Jacob, of course, in all of this doesn't know any of that story, theoretically. And so Jacob, in the Judah story, is going to assess the brothers such that Judah wins, which makes sense in a Judah story.
But Judah also sort of laid with his daughter-in-law.
Well, his own, not Jacob's.
Right.
So
right.
therefore, Judah is not invading Jacob's.
But Judah wasn't like a totally ethical man, unless he
No,
just...
as I said, our heroes are not the unflawed versions.
And which were the two sons that killed all the people?
All right, so now let's go to verses 5 and 6.
Yeah, let's finish this up first, okay?
And 5 and 6 will answer your question.
Okay.
Shimon v'Levi, Achim, Klei Chamas Mecherotehem. Shimon and Levi, the next two in birth order. You are brothers. Well, they're all brothers, and apparently partners in crime. You are brothers in the thick of it. Klei Hamas, the tools of violence, Mecherotehem, are your weapons. So you guys are need a good anger management course. Shimon and Levi are the two who did it on to Dinah.
So Jacob never said anything at the time, but now he gets him at his death.
Well, Jacob at the time did say, you dishonored me. Shame on you. Time out. You're grounded for a week. Yeah, Shimon, and Jacob at the time says, how does it look on me that you did this? Well, let's do verse 6, and then we'll talk about what happened to Shimon and Levi. Besodam al tavo nafshi bikhalam al techad kavodi, ki va'apam hargu ish, uvirtsonam ikru shor. So again, the parallelism, bisodam al tavo nafshi, and bikhalam al tetar kavodi. Those are two different ways of basically conveying the same sentiment. So we're continuing the parallelism. In counsel, you will not come into my soul. That is, I am no longer going to look for you. Reuben, I'm not looking to you for strength or counsel or support or anything. You blew it. Shimon and Levi, I'm not looking to you for any counsel. My soul is not bound up with you. And bikhalam al tehad kavodi, bikhalam kahal, a community, a congregation, a synagogue. Al tehad, this is from the word echad, uniting, oneness. Kavodi, my honor. So al tavo nafshi will not come into my soul, and al techad kavodi will not be united in my honor. And then besodam in council, bikhalam in their community. So in private counsel and in a sense of community.
But Tachad is united?
Techad, yes, be oneness in my kavod, in my honor. You will not be united in my honor. You will not come into my soul. Why not? Ki va'apam chargu ish uvirtsonam ikru shor. Again, poetic. Parallel nasty thing, bad things to do. Parallel versions of the Hamas, the violence that they did. We know they killed a whole bunch of men in their infirmity after being circumcised at an older age. We have no story where they also went out and slaughtered a few oxen. But in old poetry, so again, the poetic may have even predated what was eventually the recorded history. But there's some indication that these guys really did some nasty things. They killed and pillaged, which is basically the parallelism, chargu ish and ikru shor. Va'apam, in your anger, and virtsonam, in your desire. And actually, he's talking about them in the third person, saying, you don't get it because they did this, they did that.
I'm sure I'm not following where you are. You said a
Okay,
man.
so Sodom is their sod.
Okay, yeah.
Kahalam is their kahal.
I'm sorry, where are you?
You're going
Verse
jumping
6.
back and
Verse
forth.
6. Verse
But
6 starts
because-
with
yeah.
Sodom in
Right.
their sod,
Mhm.
and then Kihalam in their kahal, and then Apam in their ap, and Ritzonam at the last line, their Ritzon,
And Ritzon is what, though?
with a desire, a will.
What? And their will, they
Ikru shor, they slaughtered an oxen.
slaughtered an
Or
oxen.
they maimed an oxen.
So they killed a man and they slaughtered an oxen.
Yep. Parallel terms of wanton violence out of a lack of anger control.
What was the first one after Ki?
Ve'apam, in their anger. Af, remember, whenever we get angry, our nostrils flare. So that nose is the indicator of the anger.
And the word for nose is
Af,
up. In their
in their nose.
Which word are you, can you point to the word you're talking about right now?
Apam, in their nose.
And where's, how does, no, what do you get nose out of that?
Af. Af is nose. But we see the anger in the nose. So again, paralleling terms here. What happened to Shimon and Levi in the later tribes? The answer is they are two tribes that end up getting scattered in among the other tribes. Shimon is scattered in the tribe of Judah. Shimon loses ultimately all of their territory and simply becomes a subset of Judah. Levi gets scattered among the tribes, and their punishment is they become the priestly group.
But isn't that supposed to be an honor?
Well, they're dependent on welfare. The taxes don't get in, they don't get paid.
Hmm.
A king who is a narcissist, a rampant narcissist, comes in and starts firing all of the civil servants.
Ha 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 ha.
I'm imagining them as the orange-clad monks who are begging in the street.
Well, the Levites, yeah, the Levites are the civil servants. They're the recipients of the taxes. Yeah, it's an honor to be a Levi. You get a second Aliyah at Torah every Saturday morning. And you get to wash the feet of the Kohen. What an honor. But what the text is saying is Shimon and Levi become non-tribal entities because they are scattered. Shimon scattered in Judah, and Levi scattered among all the tribes as the priestly class who are the servants of God. And the Kohen, lechahen, actually means to serve God, to be a divine servant. So this justifies Reuben doesn't get to be the preeminent tribe because of a little bit of misdeed against his father. Shimon and Levi are an embarrassment to their father, and they get scattered later, and that's the impact of this blessing. And next week, you'll be looking at this. One final little statement about them. Arur apam ki az ve'ev ratam ki kashata achalkem b'Yaakov ve'afitzem b'Yisrael, which is going to be that statement of the scattering. This is what you'll be reading. And then verse 8, Yehuda. Now we get the big text. Yehuda goes from verse 8 all the way down to verse 12. And Yehuda gets nice things. Just a couple of comments along the way as you're reading. You'll notice there are a couple of places where following the text, there's a bracketed word. And that's because the text is written one way, but pronounced the way it is in brackets. So we read it not as Irah, with a hey at the end, but Iro with a vav at the end. And right before number 12, we read it again not as sotah, as sutah rather, but as suto. So just again, a reading of the text, not the way it would seem to have been written.
But the one at the end of 11, both of them are suto.
At the end of 11, that's what I said, right before 12.
But they're both, wouldn't you pronounce both of those suto? That you
Well, you
wouldn't?
do when it's vocalized.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I
remember, Torah doesn't have a vowel. So the Torah is written with a hey, which would have been read as Sutah.
Ah, I see.
And Yiro, above it, is written with a hey, and therefore would have been read Ira. But we read it as Iro and Suto. And we know that because the vowel was put in, but the vowel doesn't match the consonant text. So this is your practice reading for next week, starting verse 8. Yehuda ata yoducha achecha yadcha ba'oref oivecha yishtachavu lecha b'nei avicha. 9. Gor aryeh Yehuda miteref b'ni alita kara ravatz ka'aryeh uchlavi mi yikimenu. 10. Lo yasur shevet mi Yehuda umechokek mi ben raglav ad ki yavo shilo velo yikhat amim. Again, we'll be seeing there's parallelism throughout the whole text of parallel ways of saying the same thing. 11. Osri la gefen iro ulasoreka beni atono ki base bayayin levusho uvadam anavim suto. 12. Chachlili, whoops, I skipped a line. Chachlili einayim miyayin uleven shinayim mechalav. And then 13 picks up with Zavulun. He gets a whole verse. Zavulun lechof yamim yishkon v'hu lechof oniyot v'yarchato al tzidon. 14, Yisachar gets even less. And again, remember, we say Yisachar, we don't pronounce the second sin. Yisachar chamur garem rovetz ben ha-mishpatayim. 15, Vayar menucha ki tov ve'et haaretz ki na'ema vayet shichmo lisbol vayehi lamas oved. 16, Dan gets a little tiny bit. Dan yadin amo ka'achad shivtei Yisrael.
Okay, just two quick things. You said aniyot,
Oniyot.
and then what's the other one you said?
Oniyot, remember, has that the chamatz chataf chamatz katan.
And the first word you said of 14 was
Yisachar. We don't pronounce the Yisachar, the guy. His name is listed with 2 sins, but his name is pronounced with 1 sin.
Okay.
So therefore, they don't put a shva or anything. It's not Yisasochar or anything like that. It's just Yisachar. But he's written with 2 sins. So parallel terms throughout.
Is there any trick to know